just when you thought you were safe for more Aguadilla Tower videos after experiencing 4 PowerPoint presentations related to all kind of subject matter for that little class Delta in the northwest corner of the island of Puerto Rico, you open up today's presentation and are met with boom. That's so ODO. We're picking up the pieces, mending our broken hearts, putting on a smile, and going back to Aguadilla. This time it's personal, right? The love affair is over. This is a nice supplementary video talking about opposite direction operations. Now, it doesn't occur too often, but sometimes when pilots seek an operational advantage, aircraft landing Aguadilla, approaching from the east, winds are favorable, maybe calm, less than 5 knots, they'll request runway 26. So this will happen a lot. We know that Aguadilla favors an east operation most of the time, but when that operational advantage is oh so tempting to air crews and pilots, they will request it, and it's our job to provide a service to do that. So what do we do? Well, luckily, if you look at the standard letter of agreement between us and Aguadilla Tower, you won't see anywhere where it's mentioned about opposite direction operations. There's a whole separate governing document that is signed by the 2 parties that outline opposite direction operations. And we're going to explore that today and put it into effect using sector scenarios that we are oh so known to do. I'm excited. I can't wait to get this started. This will be another tool in that tool belt that you'll be able to breeze right through when you receive requests for opposite direction operations at Aguadilla Tower. Let's get this started. I'll see you at the next slide. In typical Ready, Set, Heavy Jet fashion, we like to have the presentations aimed at both the R side and the D side. Now, the very nature of opposite direction operation is geared to the R side. After all, they're the ones using radar to give traffic advisories and talking to the aircraft on the radio on frequency. But there is an opportunity, a window of opportunity for coordination to be done by the D side. And we can assume that this is what the D side would be doing to assist the radar controller while working an ODO event. Okay, so here we are, AM flight 6901, not yet on frequency, but we marked up the strip accordingly, and we are ready to coordinate even before the aircraft is on frequency. We're getting this done right away. It's a short hop from San Juan to Borinquen, so not a lot of time to coordinate and get everything done that we need to as per the LOA and as our personal standard working the sector. So we prepare a strip for coordination. Aguadilla Tower, D8 inbound, Aguadilla Tower, AM flight 6901, Beechcraft 1900, estimating the field 2106, visual approach, runway 8. Perfect. They would say approved. We would still leave the strip off set because the aircraft isn't yet on frequency, even though it's marked as it is, and we would relax until we hear, then you hear, dun dun dun, San Juan Center, flight 6901, South, Romeo, request runway 26. Your jaw drops, there's a face palm, and you're like, what do I do? Well, let's go to the bulleted list on the next slide, and we will address this very thing. We're going to get through this, okay? Starting now, let's go. Positive attitude, here we are. ODO, no. More like ODO, yes. You got this. Don't panic. You most certainly got this. You'll be a pro at this in no time. It's not very hard. Here is what we must do as per the San Juan Borinquen opposite direction LOA. It's a secondary document that, like I said in the title slide, is not found in the regular LOA. It is an additional document, about a 2-pager, that goes over the chain of events, what has to take place, the procedures. It's a really nice document. You don't have to look for it in the entire LOA. You can go right to that document and apply it. So it is kind of convenient. It has a convenient factor associated with it being a separate in and of itself document. And that document is supplemented by the 7110.65, Chapter 2 again, in operational priority, and the 7230, which outlines how facilities draft up procedures and make them official. It's a governing document to govern our LOAs and SOPs, which is nice. So with all of that at our back, supporting us, right? They got our back. We're going to go back to the sector and apply these documents. Luckily, just like some of the presentations we've been doing more recently, we're able to do the instruction at the sector level. We don't go to and from bulleted lists, right? So let's stay in the sector. I'll see you there. Let's see how the LOA distributes responsibilities both to Aguadilla Tower, the tower controllers over there in Aguadilla, and us in San Juan at the center. San Juan is responsible for ensuring compliance with cutoff points between aircraft conducting ODO and issuing departure headings when conducting ODO. More on those cutoff points in a subsequent slide. We'll explain those fully. San Juan and Borinquen Tower are both responsible to protect the aircraft's initial departure path until it is airborne and turned away from conflicting traffic. We share that responsibility. We can ensure that when we see the aircraft arrive on radar, making sure that they are flying the heading we assign. And the Borinquen Tower Control is obviously responsible for relaying the heading to the pilot that we gave on the landline and making sure that the aircraft is airborne. Issue traffic advisories to aircraft conducting ODO. We are both responsible for that. They have their phraseology, we have ours. We have radar to help us out as well to give traffic advisories. Use memory aids and strip marking. This is where we uncover the mystery of those strips with red background, black ODO written on them. Those are memory aids. We create a new separate bay posting right there with ODO. We put the strips that are involved in the opposite direction operation event underneath it. And strip marking, if you look at this local strip marking order for opposite direction traffic requests or opposite direction operation requests, we write ODO in red in box 26, cross out the visual approach runway 8, and we put the new request visual approach runway 26 because that is the opposite direction runway being requested. And we will circle that when we relay it to the Aguadilla Tower Controller. Take immediate action for non-compliance. Kind of obvious in the spirit of safety, if the aircraft involved, whether it's one aircraft or possibly two, if they are not doing what we assigned, because what we assigned was in the interest of safeguarding safety, well, then we have to take control action, which we can. So let's keep going with this, right? Let's keep going with this and see how it looks on the next slide. See you there. Let's get acquainted with these cutoff points that we've heard so much about and continue to familiarize ourselves with the LOA. Proceeding down in the subsequent paragraph, absent an emergency, IFR, VFR aircraft must be outside the cutoff points, issue control actions to protect the cutoff points. The ODO cutoff point for all types at Borinquen is 15 miles from the threshold, okay? These stars are not to scale, but it kind of shows you 15 nautical miles is almost a non-transition grid. It's the cutoff point. We'll illustrate what these cutoff points symbolize in the subsequent slide. Let's finish this particular scenario first with AM Flight 6901. The position who received the request must initiate coordination. So that's kind of self-explanatory. AM Flight requested runway 26 with us, thus we are the coordinating party. Now, if the aircraft was on the ground and wanted to depart runway 26 and runway 8 was being advertised, then Aguadilla would take the initiative and coordinate with us accordingly. But this presentation is geared at us coordinating with Aguadilla because this is the stuff that you will be doing. Aguadilla Tower, D8 opposite direction. Aguadilla Tower, AM Flight 6901, now visual approach runway 26 opposite direction, your approval. Make sure that you state, I like to always state now kind of expresses, hey, something has changed, right? Something in the past tense now kind of brings about that there is something that has been amended. Opposite direction must be stated in the coordination as governed by the LOA, so make sure you say it at least somewhere in that coordination event. We've said it twice just to put emphasis on it. And AM Flight 6901 approved as requested, which is a perfectly valid reply to our request for coordination. Okay, so good job with that. You see how we're building up to completing this opposite direction event successfully, safely, everything that we are charged to do. Okay, so see you at the next slide, and we will continue on to build this. Great job with that coordination event. We see we have ODO bay header, AM Flight 6901. Everything is coordinated. The type, the time at the airport, we slashed out runway 8. We now show that ODO is runway 26. Runway 8 is still being advertised. Runway 26 is this unique operation taking place. everybody is in the know. We emphasize something has changed with that now, which I kind of like to do. So that's a technique. And also stating opposite direction twice in the coordination to really drive that point home, saying, hey, this guy's landing runway 26, not runway 8, and it is out of the ordinary. So let's get back to Amflight 6901. We actually never replied when they initially checked on. We kind of froze a moment in time and talked about it and went over the coordinating. Now let's get to this clearing part of it. Amflight 6901, expect visual approach runway 26, report Aguadilla Airport in sight. Amflight 6901, expecting runway 26, will report in sight. So this is an example of a fairly easy ODO event. We have no opposite direction traffic requesting release off Aguadilla, so we would just treat Amflight 6901 as any arrival. Point out the airport, terminate radar services when they see the airport and clear them for the visual approach, and transfer communications to the tower and wait for a downtime. Now, in our subsequent examples, we will explore what happens when there are requests for releases and we have to use those cutoff points, right? We kind of just made our way through a couple of slides here without using the cutoff points, even though we alluded to them and they are very important. Let's explore what those look like during an ODO event. See you at the bulleted list for the rundown. I'll see you there. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? Just like your typical Aguadilla arrival, just a different runway. There were some subtle changes though. We now have a bay header where that aircraft belongs inside because it's bringing our attention and saying, hey, this is an opposite direction operation taking place. Also, the coordination for the D side was a little bit different with some added phraseology in there. We actually made it harder than it had to be because we took the initiative to coordinate the aircraft on runway 8 initially before the aircraft even checked on. If we would have waited for the aircraft to check on and acknowledge that request for runway 26, we would have only had one coordination event to Aguadilla Towers instead of coordinating runway 8, sitting there being happy, hearing runway 26, and now having to re-coordinate and amend some flight data to the Aguadilla Tower controller. So anyway, we made it harder than we had to, but for illustrative purposes and to introduce you to an added level of complexity, we did that. But otherwise, this would be a typical Aguadilla arrival. And to make yourself have a sense of peace of mind, to give you peace of mind with this subject matter, think of how many times you work an Aguadilla arrival and have no other traffic to either follow or have Aguadilla make a request for an aircraft to be released off the field. Well, this is no different, but that could happen, even though it happens very seldom. Let's see and get acquainted with the criteria section of the LOA that introduces some more complexity, some illustrative complexity that we long to achieve to really send this point home and to use those cutoff points that we talked about. So the en route controller must ensure the following, ... I'll see you at the next slide, and we'll cover each situation one by one as governed by the LOA. See you there. Picking up with that ... we see in the sector we have Amflight 6901 coordinated just as we did in the previous example. All right, Brink and Tower request release Amflight 7120 off runway 8. There we go. We put the strip in the ODO bay header because this aircraft is now involved in this opposite direction operation event. Perfect. Step 1 completed. Next, we give our instruction. Amflight 7120, turn left heading 290, maintain 6000, released. As we know, westbound aircraft off of runway 8, 290 heading as per the LOA. We write in our release instructions. And here we are with what the LOA says about the ODO. Arrival and departure, which is what we have here. We have an opposite direction arrival, Amflight 6901, and our departure off of runway 8, Amflight 7120. The departing aircraft must be airborne and turning to avoid conflict prior to the air arrival reaching the cutoff point. So what does that mean? That means that Amflight 7120 has to be airborne and established on that 290 heading, on that 290 heading, write it there, on that 290 heading before Amflight 6901 reaches the cutoff point. So before Amflight 6901 transgressions this imaginary 5th 15 nautical mile extended runway center line straight line, AM flight 7120 has to be on that 290 heading or a heading that is definitely starting to keep it away from the inbound course of AM flight 6901. All right, not too bad. It's pretty easy, especially when the aircrafts are far and away out. You can accommodate this request very reasonably. And here's where you give traffic. Even though they're very far out, AM flight 6901 will probably never see AM flight 7120, right? Never see them. You still give this as dictated by the 7230. AM flight 6901 opposite departing traffic runway 8 Brasilia. Simple. Since they're not on radar yet, you can't give radar advisories, right, with the clock position, mileage, direction type of aircraft and altitude. You give a simple traffic advisory. So good job with that. So just remember, when you have an arrival ODO versus a regular good old departure, just make sure they do not reach the cutoff point prior to an aircraft turning to avoid conflict. An easier way to think about it is make sure that your departure is turned on course away from AM flight 6901 prior to them reaching 15-mile final is another easy way to think about that. Now just remember, we used a westbound example here. Now what if the aircraft was east? Well, just make sure that you're not giving headings that initially put the aircraft into conflict. If the aircraft wants to go east, just turn them north. You can figure all that out later once you get them on radar and able to use the radar to determine climb rate, swapping altitudes, when to turn on course, possible point outs with sector 6. But a westbound example is easy to illustrate. And eastbound, just get imaginative with your headings. That's all you have to do, and make sure that they are turning to avoid conflict. So let's take a look at what the next example and next traffic situation looks like. But good job with that. So I tricked you. We actually have an update slide here on showing you what the traffic situation looks like. AM flight 6901 is saying the 4000 is not quite on a 15-mile final yet, as AM flight 7120 appears on radar and already established on a westbound heading, turning to that 290. You see how these requests can be accommodated if the aircraft are far enough away from the cutoff points. There should be no reason why this shouldn't become a standard tool that you use upon request. It's not too bad. Now, when the traffic situation is different, you might want to rethink it and deny it, or just wait until the aircraft is landed to accommodate the aircraft opposite direction, which might be easier. But this is how you get both aircraft doing what they want to do in a timely and efficient manner. So let's move on to the next example, which is going to be very interesting, and I think you'll like it a lot. So keep up the good vibes. We're doing great. So here we see we have Swift Flight 455 already talking to and cleared on the visual approach to runway 8, talking to Aguadilla Tower. And we have AM flight 6901 already coordinated at some arbitrary time in the past. But as you see, our ODO bay header is still present with AM flight 6901 there. And since Swift Flight 455 is still in our charge, right, we share the responsibility of ensuring the safety of the aircraft as dictated by the LOA. They are placed in that bay as well because they are landing runway 8, and we have an inbound to runway 26. We have an ODO event. Both of them belong in the bay. So this situation is an arrival, Swift Flight 455, and arrival, AM flight 6901. The arriving aircraft must have crossed the landing threshold prior to the opposite direction arrival reaching the cutoff point. So what does that mean? Swift Flight 455 has to be over the runway threshold prior to AM flight 6901 establishing themselves on a 15-mile final, right? 15-mile final. Let's call it what it is. And we have a traffic advisory for that. AM flight 6901 opposite direction traffic, short final, runway 8, Boeing 737. Very, very good. Now, chances are AM flight 6901 will never see Swift Flight 455. Swift Flight 455 is just going to be crossing the numbers by the time AM flight 6101 even gets to a 20-mile final. But let's just explain that. Swift Flight 455 has to be crossing the runway threshold prior to AM flight 6901 being 15 miles out from runway 26. So just ensure that, and if you cannot ensure it, either deny the opposite direction operation request or wait until Swift Flight 455 is on the ground, vector AM flight 6901 around the cutoff point, just take some kind of control action. But more often than not, especially in this situation, you will be able to accommodate that request nonetheless. You will get better at this, taking this presentation and what you've learned into account, and aircraft characteristics and the distances involved. So let's move on and let's keep this going. Piggybacking and recycling the old example, we see Amplite 6901 has gotten a little bit closer to the field, not quite at the cutoff point, still outside of the 15-mile final, and Swift Flight 455 has disappeared in the coast list because we can assume they're somewhere near the landing threshold over the numbers. But here's where the wrench gets thrown into the proverbial gear. All right, Aguadilla, Swift Flight 455 on the go around chimes in on the loudspeaker, and we have to pause and think to ourselves logically through this. The first thing we have to consider is that Swift Flight 455 was established on the visual approach to runway 8. There is no published missed approach segment for visual approach at any airport in any part of the world. So they would have had to call us anyways because we now have to give the missed approach instructions. Okay, and here's our second point. An arrival, Amplite 6901, and a go around, missed approach, low approach, which describes what Swift Flight 455 is now. The aircraft performing a go around, missed approach, or low approach must be issued a turn to avoid conflict prior to the arrival reaching the cutoff point. So, to put this simplistically, our Swift Flight 455, upon kicking up the tires, putting in the throttle, putting the flaps up, and starting to climb again and announcing that they're going missed, has been turned into from an arrival into a departure. So even though it wasn't anticipated, totally unexpected, and now has a sense of urgency to it, we treat this just like we would any departure, like we did in our first example. That's all you have to do. So now you as R8 are responsible to turn the aircraft to avoid confliction with Amplite 6901, right? We can't have Amplite 61 no closer than a 15-mile final, and we have to find a heading for Swift Flight 455 to be at to deconflict it. Well, why not use that 290 heading again? And why does that 290 heading make sense? Well, 291 immediately deconflicts Amplite 6901 and this Boeing 737 Swift Flight 455. Two, it also sets the aircraft up for whatever they're going to do next. Are they going to go to Aqaba next? Are they going to go out there to Aqaba or probably like closer up here? Or it sets them up to put them back in the traffic pattern again and get set up for the visual approach whenever Amplite 6901 is landed. Now, with that being considered, Amplite 6901 now has precedence. We're not going to delay them anymore. So Swift Flight is going to have to fly somewhere for a little bit of time. They simply can't stay in the pattern and do this ODO thing. They're coming back to us, being put on our frequency for us to maybe put them on a longer downwind or set them up Aqaba so they can fly the whole approach while Amplite 6901 does their business on runway 26. So with that being said, let's just go with it. We have it canned in our mind. It's canned in the LOA. And we answer R8, Roger, Swift Flight 455, turn left heading 290, maintain 3000. Perfect. And what do? We give traffic. This is where we want to let Amflight know, hey, something's going on, even though they may not be able to see the Boeing 737 in the runway environment turning to avoid conflict. Amflight 690 in opposite direction. Opposite departing traffic. Runway 8, Boeing 737 missed approach, turning northbound. Perfect. Great job with that. Great job with that. Let's take this scenario just a little bit further down the way. Amplite 6901 is still well beyond the 15-mile cutoff point for runway 26. Swift Flight 455 has auto-acquired because, as you know, their track, whenever they fell off the radar, right, stopped being surveilled by ADS-B or the radar, goes to your coast suspense list. And when the aircraft gets above a certain altitude, still squawking the same beacon code as they were in the approach stage of flight, it'll auto-acquire again and populate your scope. And it's with that old information, with the visual approach still assigned for the altitude, but you see that a target is a target, and it's very helpful nonetheless. You got that call from Aguadilla saying that they were on the mist, so you have a primary method of radar identification that you don't have to have Swift Flight 455 ident or give you a position report. So things are kind of working out good for you. And you hear this, SAM 1, Swift Flight 455 reaching 3000, heading 290. What is awesome, too, about all of this is when the aircraft auto-acquired, they were already in their northwest bound turn avoiding Amflight 6901's intended flight path altogether. And as you see, that 290 heading works out perfectly to keep them westbound, to set them up for either another visual approach to runway 8, obviously after Amflight 6901, because you don't want to keep exponentially going around in circle with these ODO operations, or as you'll see for Aqaba for the RNAV runway 8. Swift flight 450 San Juan Center, radar contact, clear direct Aqaba, expect RNAV runway 8 approach. That is perfect. That northwestbound turn and the speeds and them climbing and getting prepared for the approach, setting the aircraft up, configuring it accordingly will give Amflight 6901 plenty of time to complete the approach phase, landing phase, and now ODO is totally out of the question. Now, let's get back to Amflight 6901 since both aircraft are on radar now and give them a proper traffic advisory just to keep complying with the letter agreement we have. Amflight 6901 traffic 1 o'clock 20 miles northwestbound Boeing 737 climbing 3000. They should have already been looking for them because we gave them that kind of pseudo non-radar traffic advisory about the go round taking place, and here you were able to give a radar advisory, right? A proper traffic called Amflight 6901. Now everybody's in the know and everything is wonderful and safe and perfect, and you applied everything you needed to completely negotiate this traffic scenario. So great job with that, guys. The sun has set on another job well done. Great job going back out west, mending your broken heart, and just telling Aguadilla who is boss after those 4 heartbreaking videos on your love affair. We learned a lot today, and we put some tools into the tool belt for when ODO requests come up. Now, they don't happen too often, but when they do, you are now armed with the proper procedure, methods, and techniques to completely kill this whenever it does arise. Just remember to follow the procedures. Always maintain a sense of awareness in your coordinating, making sure you say ODO, opposite direction, making sure you state which runway, the runway other than the one being advertised. Give those proper traffic advisories both to the aircraft that is not yet radar identified yet, and when they are radar identified, continue giving radar advisories using proper strip marking, box 26, ODO, and the opposite direction runway and or visual approach or RNAV approach in use. Making sure you use your memory aids, the ODO bay header, making sure you use all of these tools to help complete this task in a very methodical and technical manner. Great job with that. It was a great refresher. Maybe you haven't had an ODO operation around, or if this is your first exposure to ODO events, I think it's a great presentation for you to really wrap your arms around this and get it under your control, and to have no fear as you make your way into the unknown being a potential ODO event request. So great job with that. Steve here, had a fantastic time. Thanks for spending some of your time with me today talking about this stuff. I hope you had a good time. I know I sure did. I'll see you at the next presentation, and remember, keep your attitude just like your separation, positive. I will see you later. All right, see you.